Got it.
If we're all mute apart from Alan.
So this is something that I wrote ages ago. I've been going back through my back catalogue like you do, but this was also spurred on by the fact that I can't remember whether it was Norman or someone else said last time I was on. It was about sort of like, queuing and things like that. Anyway, it's called Nothing Better to Do. Some busy restaurants have you waiting in the street. Others let you book a table and go straight to your seat. Personally, I like the camaraderie of standing in a queue. It puts a different slant on life. You take a different view. The line is getting shorter. Now I'm at the front. I turn to the person behind me and say, "No, after you. I've not come to eat out. I've only come to queue. The lunchtime rush is nearly over. Let's go to the bank. I need a little cash. I need to buy some stamps." The assistant says, "Good afternoon. How may I help you?" I only want a little cash. As a vacant cash machine comes into view, she points out that there is no queue. I tell her that I'm in no rush and that I love to queue. Finally, I'm off to the post office, where professionals like to queue. There are parcels here and letters there and the bureau to change. So much to see and do. I look at forms, I look at cards, then eventually buy some stamps. I stick them on my letters, and that's to the supermarket I tramp. I'm in luck. The schools have just finished, as all the mums and kids come into view. I meander around the aisles. There's nothing better to do. With my trolley fully laden, I find the longest queue. My shopping repacked in my trolley, I push it through the lift door and up to the car park on the roof. Now loaded into my car, I join another queue. Slowly round and down, I let other drivers through, to the disgust of drivers behind me, who toot their horns and shout abuse. At the traffic lights and junctions, I join further queues. Round the final corner, my home comes into view. I can't think of a better way to spend the day. Can you? And this is sort of kind of based on, I never played pub football, but I used to go to a pub when I was younger where pub football was played, and a lot of pub football gets played around the area around the back of where I live. There are a few athletes here as they run around with their bellies full of last night's beer, shouting scornfully at the ref, accusing him of being blind or deaf. It's another weekend match gets underway. All the usual football phrases are on display. Square ball, long ball, man on shoot, as each team builds up an attack and then regroup. They all head the ball with trepidation, fear at last night's hangovers beginning to clear. The air is full of oohs and ahs, girlfriends wait in the warmth of cars. There's a crescendo followed by a cheer as the ball goes in the back of the net, but the scorer is offside. The whistle is clear. Now there's a barrage of expletives at the ref. The game returns back to normal. Under the player's breath, they query the ref's parentage and where he's from. For 90 minutes, the ball gets kicked around the park. A dog sits on the sideline, watching, restraining a bark, until he can't take it anymore. He invades the pitch at the vital moment when someone's about to score. The whistle blown, the game's held up, the invader put on a leash. The game restarts, the dog walks away, and the game continues now in peace. Now the final whistle is blown, now the game is done. It's time to go and have a shower and go back down the pub. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Well, this doesn't involve any queuing, hopefully.
No.
Joel is almost here. That's very good. So, connecting to audio now. Right. So I'll just wait for Joel to come on stream, which I'm sure he will shortly. Because I haven't seen him since, must be 20 years, Peter, since I saw Joel.
Really, as long as that.
Yeah, I think it was about 2003 that he moved out of Croydon. I think. Yeah. But he's muted at the moment, and I'm muted. Hello, Joel.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. You're joining the Peter League.
Yes.
Lovely
I'll just make a bigger picture. Yeah.
When were you last? Was it 20 years since I've seen you at Poets Anonymous?
No,
Must-
since not as long as 20.
Wasn't
A
it?
few years. Yeah.
A few years. Yeah, nice to see you anyway.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Pete, it is recorded and put on YouTube. Peter presses a little button and records,
Yeah.
when we're actually reading. And we, as usual, we do 2 halves. You don't have to stay for part 2 if you don't want to, but so it's 2 poems each normally, and then we do the rounds and have a cup of tea about 9 o'clock-ish normally, and then come back for part 2. Okay.
Right. That
Right.
sounds good enough. Yeah.
Okay, so it's strictly speaking, it's your turn after Ruth. So if Ruth wants to read now, and we mute when other people are reading. Press the little mute
Okay.
button.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, the first poem's called Precepts. We were told that lying would bring us to perdition, that our tongues would turn black, and no one would ever trust us or listen to what we said, even if we used emphatic gestures or in a frenzy swore on our mother's life. Crossing our hearts, we found only fueled suspicion. It was better to stay blank-faced, maintaining an innocent gaze, rather than blurt an excuse. We were told to be good children, to avoid bad habits, to share and share alike, and always, always tell the truth. But it seemed unjust when we discovered our father's stash of Players number 6 after he swore he had given up. Right, and second one, it's about a couple we came across when we were walking in the States. Tom and Mary. We came upon them gazing at the Chisos Mountains, watching the sun sink behind the ridge in a bank of fire. They were Texans, revisiting this desert place where eagles flew and quails scuttled through the brush. We walked with them, feeling the dry heat on our skin, stamping the ground, on their advice, to scare the snakes. They showed us the grassed humps of Civil War graves, then searched for beads and arrowheads in the sandy ground. Next spring, they came to meet us at the airport, driving us in their SUV to where they lived, on the plantation estate, a neighborhood of pecan trees with fallow deer grazing in their shade, and houses widely spaced, some bearing the Texas star. How much land did we have? We described our suburb, hedged gardens where the foxes came, green lawns unvisited by skunk or armadillo during the night, skies crossed by winking plains, almond blossom on our roadside trees. There was no vastness here. Our canyons were the city streets, but there were orchards, fields of hops, better than they thought. Right, thank you.
Lovely poems, lovely poems. That one about the America is just stunning. Thank you. Really beautiful. Joel, we're ready for you. You need to unmute, Joel.
Clicking the wrong bit. That should be. Hello. Right. Can you hear me now? Yep. Good. Well, that's an interesting view of a different country. I thought I'd do a couple of travelers' poems as well to begin with. This is The Survivors. I wrote it initially and I revised it since in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. Thoughtful. I leave the War Remnants Museum in the rain. Past tall, straight trees that have stood oblivious to so much crime, so much inhumanity, fears, pain, so much human history. Their bases, painted with white lime, they have grown skyward through time, and now, after 100 years, dwarf our petty lives with their grand innocence. Thank you. And this one is Japanese garden, a visit to Kyoto in 2012. It's a garden of a Buddhist temple. Very small garden, I had. Right. Winter. Snow is about to fall. Viewed from within the building, the garden consists only of 4 rocks, a camellia in modest flower and grey raked pebbles. Only everything that is necessary. The afternoon light clearly illuminates the gravel ridges. They are sea waves left by the rake. After 500 million years elsewhere, the rocks were precisely placed here 300 years ago. The rocks are islands. Gravel sea waves battering their shores, salt wind blowing over them, gulls crying, fishermen struggling with nets, a child playing on the sand. Or the rocks are just stones, evidence of 500 million years. Or a sequence of moments, a camellia flower falling, the gravel raked each morning, your voice in the still room. The garden is linked to everything. In the cold air, a snowflake falls onto the inland sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. 2 beautiful poems. Thank you very much. Especially enjoyed the second one. It's amazing. Sue, are you ready for us?
I am. If you
Right.
wouldn't mind me reading 3, they're very short because I'm not going to stay for the second half as usual.
Okay,
Is that okay?
that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I don't think I've read this one. I think last time I was going to read it and I couldn't get to the meeting. It's called 6 Months Below.
Hello?
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Yep. Okay, 6 months below. Dark days almost over. He must camouflage his desperate longing for her, cover it with leaves, for winter cannot hold her while the world above her waits. Though sky is blank, snow-scented, sleeping hedges silver brown, her wheat will rise to green and gold, and sooner than she thinks. He has to let her go now. She has everything she needs, and he can't fasten her with words or even pomegranate seeds, no matter how he tries. Calm, so calm this gentle morning. See the snowdrops, both of them might start again. Okay, the second one is called Late Lunch, and I don't know if you've ever met an old flame that you've from the past and you suddenly realize that you actually still quite like them, and this is about this. Late lunch. How strange to find my long, slow burn has lasted all these years. Is it the same for you? We lunch, we share the wine, we reminisce. We cannot speak about it, never could. I spoon up words and move them round my mouth, then swallow them again. There's no way in. You tell the story of your life, I tell you mine. It's not the truth. When forced to choose, I always pick some safe thing from the menu. So it seems, do you. Thank you. And this last one is called Duet. And this was actually a friend of mine who plays the viol. And I went to a concert of 2 bass viols. It was at Blackheath at a Quaker meeting house. And I wrote this poem about it. It's called Duet. Within this timbered place of peace, the gift of music joins and separates, fills up the circle of the room, and gathers at the apex of the roof where one tall window holds the sun and frames dry branches woven in the April light, bare twigs about to burst out into song. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Lovely. This long, slow burn. Love it. Anthony, are you ready? You're muted, Anthony. Are you ready, Anthony? You're on mute at the moment. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me
That's it.
now?
Yes, hear you now.
Right, I can read you my poem now. Can you hear me? Yeah. Full of looming fruit, the black wind whispers, the children lived briefly yonder in a blue cave. The silent river protrudes by the forked road where the seagrass grows. The seagulls mutely follows, jaded in the evening sun. Old church bells whisper chimes, coolness and autumn play in their lonely chambers. Sacred blue chimes in played blue footsteps. The rusted windows rattles to the graveyard on the hill. The legends are foretold, twig-like, the people remember the dark ember days of spring. And I've got one more. It's called A Torrent of Rain Flatters. The ghosts of fear are nestling, glaring clouds that are driven, a procession of baying donkeys. The pond's reflection loftily decries as the gulls shriek for attention. Nighttime's plumage bandages bluish. A torrent of rain flatters the receiving river, painted by the sunshine in the days of gold.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Enjoyed those. Thank you. Thanks a lot. You're with us for part 2, I hope. So that's very good.
Yes.
Yeah, good. You need to mute, Anthony. That's it. Martin, are you okay to go? And unmute. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I have produced one new poem. Gestation period seems to be about 6 months per poem nowadays. But this was, believe it or not, this is a children's talk on Palm Sunday, which inspired this. I was thinking about the different meanings of the word palm. Of course, it's the palm of your hand, and palmate is the botanical name for a leaf structure that looks like a hand. Anyway, this is palms. Down the Mount of Olives moves a donkey with a rider who, though fully human, somehow proves much more. We thirst for what is true, and as hosannas fill the air, palms are waving. Young and old surround this humble king, aware of all the prophets have foretold. Some days later, taken, tried, though guiltless, yet was scourged and hanged, pierced, forsaken and denied, mocked, insulted, then harangued. Those gentle palms which soothed and healed, which broke the bread to feed a crowd, and also made the stars, would yield to wicked hands, which were allowed to torture him. Hands which held those waving palms, now angry fists. Praise became dark hate, which filled their hearts. No pity there exists. This carpenter's son, who knew the feel of wood, and every tree he made, suspended from the cross, so real his pain, soon on cold stone is laid. But what of us? Will our palms too follow the Master, show compassion, be lifted up in praise, bestow blessings only, or in bitter passion, grow callous, selfish and self-willed, reject the ways of grace and love, with aspirations unfulfilled, will never know the one above. Thank you. I was planning to read a Richard Wilbur, which is one you may or may not have heard before. This mentions palms, but that's just coincidental. It's not really about that. It's a problem from Milton. In Eden, palm and open-handed pine displayed to God and man their flat perfection. Carefully coiled, the regulation vine submitted to our general sire's inspection. And yet the streams in mazy error went. Powdery flowers a potent odour gave. The trees on second thoughts were lushly blent and swashed forever like a piling wave. The builded coma like a hurdling horse achieves the rocks. With wild informal roar, the spray upholds its freedom and its force, but leaves the limpet and the whelk ashore. In spirals of the whelk's eternal shell, the Midas Swedenborg to heaven flew, that found it such a mathematical hell that Emerson was damned if it would do. Poor Adam, devilled by your energy, what power egged you on to feed your brains? Envy the gorgeous gallops of the sea, whose horses never know their lunar reigns. Thank you.
Wow. Theology and literature in one session. Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. Peter.
Right, I'm going to read a couple of poems by Gillian Clark. Lines on first hearing. Suddenly, on a silent gardening day, 2 notes from half a mile away. Did we hear it? Too far, too deep in trees, heaving their bones from sleep to be quite sure. Again, a bird's voice, C and A flat. Treacherous sweetness in 2 clear notes across the valley's well of silence and the winds of April. We set our tools aside and listen hard to hear it calling from the leafless wood, excited once more by a summer guest who pitches camp in a small bird's plundered nest, grows fat on murder, and in a stolen house rehearses 2 notes in an angel's voice. That one. And The Honey Man. The tin trunk rusts in a red pool with its cargo of old frames, crumbling honeycomb dark with pollens and a dried glisten of wings from dead summers. By the gate, 6 feet from the car, the abandoned hive the wild swarm took over last year, that we meant to move in winter as they slept before the March sun woke them. From the car we watch behind glass. He comes through the dusk in his spacesuit and veil, charming the bees with smoke from the swung censer. He lifts off the roof and is jeweled with bees. The air strums with a million stings as they settle on the glass eye to eye with the children. At moonrise, before bed, they take turn to press their ears against the hive, to breathe in the honey and hear a million cooling wings beat like a city in a box. Gillian Clark.
Ex-poet laureate of Wales. Thank you, well read. Lorraine, I'm sorry, I got slightly out of order there. You should have followed on from Martin, but anyway, it's your turn now and welcome.
Hi, oh, right. I've only got small ones, it's all right.
Right,
Because I've been in Beckenham a long, long time. From 1970, I went to Elton, then back again at 2004, 2004. Anyhow, this is called Beckenham Addict for short. And the Times wrote a very good review on Beckenham very recently, if anybody knows about that. So I just wrote quickly that it's not exactly what you would believe, though the Times inspired you with your modern hero. There's more in Beckenham it could achieve, as David Bowie's art would be eyed as weirdo. Cannily, Emma Raducanu's change her old champion role, now awaiting with her bated breath a new stroke she might lax, and for sure she won't be on any racket dole, as five-star sports coached by his Sebastian Stax. That was his coach now. But Beckenham always does his level best, its level best. Its folk are compelled to walk and never rest, to guarantee their natives are strong and tough. As pretense of its footbridge, it's just an old bluff. If you know Beckenham, it's supposed to be repaired, but it's almost a year that nobody can use it. You just have to keep walking around the station in Beckenham. I'll do a very little one, and not a couple afterwards after the interval. This is totally different, and it's haiku style. It's called Their Rivets Are Poor. Great being some sort of self-plumber, yet dumber, no one sees a fault. You're prostrate on floor, the screw won't move anymore. Loo reels are mute in awe. IKEA's the store, which must hold both blame and shame. Their rivets are poor. So I have to do that at home. If there's a gadget screwed to the wall, I'm laying down screwing, paper holder and things like that. Just three, but I've got three very short, simple ones for later. So that was mine. Anyhow, thanks.
well said. Okay, no double entendre screwing on the floor or anything like that. No, I have none of that here. We're all clean-minded. Right, two poems here. Forgive my awful Latin pronunciation. Pro regi et patria. We only ask, the headmaster said, that you respect the school. Do your duty to king and country when you get the call. One day they'd leave as young men to the sound of the fife and drum, unaware that in time most will be blown to kingdom come. The laughing boys knew none of this when they played in the old school quad, that they'd ever do the things they did in the name of the flag and God, or the jodhpurs and the shiny boots would be mired in mud, nor the smart brown uniforms change colour with their blood. They said the harvest of a generation was reaped to save the nation, all done in the name of liberty, to never bend the knee. They called it a war to end wars, but that was not to be. That's that one. And this one is my attempt at one of Martin's favourite forms, a villanelle, Martin. This is called Before the Eating of the Apple. In childhood, it feels that life is a game, without a goal, without a theme, a time without guilt, a time without shame, a time when our ambition had but a poor flame. There was no goal, there was no dream. In a life of play, every day there's no blame. A time of innocence, of days each the same, learn a times table and a reading scheme. A time without guilt, a time without shame, no job to hold, no status to claim, no journey to work in an endless stream. In a life of play every day, there's no blame. On days of trouble, when challenges came, it seems in memory the sun would soon beam. A time without guilt, a time without shame. Only later does failure take on a name. When we learn that we can't always reign supreme, we can recall those days when we had self-esteem. In a life of play every day, there's no shame. Anyway, it's now break time, cup of tea time. Right. Okay.
Okay, this is called Blue Melancholy. Sat alone in his high-rise council apartment, the evening sun's shadows climbed his living room walls. His furniture seemed to move around the room of its own accord. His window frames the now darkening, deserted outside world. He rises to make a cup of tea. Pausing, he looks from the solitary window. Down in the street, traffic lights change on their own as the countless windows of the estate reveal numerous setting suns. The building's walls still streaked with rain from a sudden squall. The sky briefly becomes brighter as the dying sunset melts from golden to pale blue before the dying light dissolves into the black down the street. Strange shadows of strangers merge into the night. Sitting illuminated by the television's light with cuppa in hand, his thoughts drift towards his own mortality as he reflects on the passing of his peers. Outside, the moon repeats the journey of the dying sun, climbing the blank windows of the estate, bringing with it a blue melancholy as he continues his reflective thoughts. Thank you.
You got another one for us, Alan,
Yeah,
please?
yeah, I can do another one.
Oh.
This is called If I Speak of Love. If I speak of love, then I'm speaking about family. And if I'm speaking about family, I'm speaking about my father. And if I'm speaking about my father, I'm speaking about white overalls. And if I'm speaking about white overalls, I'm speaking about graft. And if I'm speaking about graft, I'm speaking about my mother. And if I'm speaking about my mother, I'm speaking about roast dinners. And if I'm speaking about roast dinners, I'm speaking about my childhood. And if I'm speaking about my childhood, I'm speaking about hard times. And if I'm speaking about hard times, I'm speaking about growing up. And if I'm speaking about growing up, I'm speaking about kindness. And if I'm speaking about kindness, I'm speaking about my children. And if I'm speaking about my children, I'm speaking about innocence. And if I'm speaking about innocence, I'm speaking about loss. And if I'm speaking about loss, I'm speaking about love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. That's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Made me come over all sentimental now. Thank you. Lorraine, is it too early to call on you again?
Right, I'm muted.
Right.
Mine's only a small one, 3 verses. I hope it's not crude enough for any of you. It was on the theme that Croydon Poetry Hour last Saturday about accents and things. So this is just a few words I put. And it's called The Bagel is Best. If you thought you could discern every tone, you might not know each escaped from a strange zone. If you were a Chut Semite from Shevingham, Amsterdam, or The Hague, you wouldn't be vague. It's a bye-bye you request, though the baker informs you're the bagel is best. Litvaks and Polacks, grandpas, don't share the same name. Such a shame. Half confirm they're adamant and won't agree to be Zaders and Ziders while they all flee. In UK Scotland, you'd hear, "Och, aye, the new." It's nothing new. Not quite pure Oxbridge, but guttural and gibberish. But sure, Girton for certain is now offering Yiddish, which they are doing. And yes, there are always litvaks and Pollacks. There were in the East End. I'm a crossbreed. My mother's side is Pollacks and my father's are litvaks from Latvia and Russia, blah, blah. But yes, they have a different dialects and accent rather, when they're talking Yiddish, etc. So that was that. I've got one more little one if you want me. Not long, let's find it. One somewhere. Oh no, I don't think I've got the one I wanted. I think it would be enough actually. No, I can tell you about them. No, I won't about it, the herring. Well, I will actually. I don't know if I've read this here. It's 6 verses, but I'll go through it quickly if you like. It's only on 1 page. It's called "Are You Not Partial to Herring?" Aren't hospitals about to be extinct? And Urim Bervin probably winked. He knew he'd go private when he sensed his demise. Luxury and comfort he knew would be wise. After all, 'twas him who had egged on the medics, the Minister of Health who fed their palates of gold. He honed them into all herds of skeptics, and as eclectics, their skills no doubt would be sold. Wouldn't you realize he could see the real outlook? Join the Tesco few and you don't have to book. They might well have mistook you for herring in marinade and directed you to aisle 20 for an adept hearing aid. If folk went to Harrods, they'd find cathartic gods, though healing insists the demand for high fees. Yet the patients are cured by cashiers in squads, with nearby first-year medics trying to appease. More options appeal to the vox populi. Asda and Waitrose know specifically. A booth passport doubles up for implanting teeth, or if gums appear weak, you could opt for a wreath. Further up, there's an aisle. No, not the wedding one. They're selling prenuptials in case mating's not fun. They've had 3 children and he'll support none, as in all civilized lawsuits, each lays down a gun. The Commonwealth or the poverty-riven will not come across signs of any good luck. Brexit made sure all foreigners were driven. With no profs and cash, Bevan's Isle will be stuck, which they will eventually with the NHS. But that's what I thought about the NHS anyhow. Continue. A lecture.
Thank you, Lorraine. They're not exactly covering themselves in glory at the moment, are they? So, right. We could go to Martin now, I think.
Okay. A couple from the one book that I've managed to produce. So this is Modern Horticulture. In the heart of a garden, a pane is dissolved by a surfeit of colour and light. Obscured by this gluttony, senses delight. De Pallia's Bright Nights in the Gardens of Spain does a similar thing for the ear. The mind is anaesthetised, trouble recedes, like the gardener's enemies, wildness and weeds. A well-managed garden burns colour all year. Apart from the publicised blooms, there's aureate, maculate, evergreen leaves that the casual winter observer deceives as the synthetic flowers in corners of rooms, contrivance and artifice, art which needs lopping and training, effort and strain in the echoing avenues, vistas of pain, of pruning rank growth in your gardener's heart. Lost someone I was going to read. Oh, this one. This is a sonnet. Regrets. In company with ghosts of all my former selves, I mourn the absence of those friends, my old familiars. One's heart intends to nurture them, but thoughts are often warmer than deeds, and few remain. After some storm, a bond is severed, others move. Who sends those letters when he should? Time only lends nostalgia at low interest. Trauma distorts the view. We English are too cold. When it's too late, we miss them. Children, wife, old colleagues, passengers on the lifeboat of life, whose affections we would always hold but didn't, being distracted somehow. Learn to cherish what's rare and none can earn. And one short one, if I may. I remember with a sudden pang, I've lost my only love. No patient arms await my tired limbs. Where blood once sang through this beleaguered heart, dry thoughts which drove my green and fragrant pleasures far away. This core is a machine which coldly calculates the worth of things, how much to pay, nostalgic for what was or might have been. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. I think we covered the gamut there, from your very wistful one about love and hiding your feelings, all the way over to Alan's reminiscing about all the joys of parenting and childhood. Yeah, lovely. Ruth, okay.
Right, the first one's called Putty. You know, those sort of infant winged cherubs that sort of flutter around in old paintings. Putty. There's scarcely a canvas without them, tumbling on half-fledged wings through a summer sky, not a stitch or even a halo, their chubby faces lit by what's happening above or below, sorrowing, devout, overly droll, streaking like arrows if a woman's grabbed by a muscular god, bingy around the virgin skirts, too familiar by far with Venus, but solemn enough when they rise in celestial vapours over the stable roof, or see what no child should see in the way of violence, though most, it has to be said, are just curly errand boys delivering garlands. And the other one, yes, Lament for My Old Brown Sofa. I last saw you disappearing into a van, canvas flapping, bereft of your nap, your spring, your lumbar support, your cushions like squashed nests harbouring crumbs. It's hard to remember that you were on Friend, low on the ground, purchased from Harrods, that from here we watched Men on the Moon and the 6-Day War. Nestled down, there were bedtime stories, teenage lolling, sickness at times, or just somewhere to flop when returning from work, a refuge from thought. Here decisions were made, forgiveness sought. You enveloped us, a surface from which we sprang when there was a knock on the door, but you sagged, overcome by our trials and delights.
Oh, thank you, Ruth. I had this vision of all these little fat little baby boys showing all their tackle, and if you painted like that these days, you get labelled as a paedophile, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Lovely poems, anyway. Thank you, Joel. What have you got for us?
I'm afraid I've got many old ones at the moment.
Lovely.
Not
They're
that
new
I'm
to
not
us.
that I'm not writing, but I'm not happy with what I'm writing at the present time. It's just not working. But anyway, I'll read a very old one, a short one, and a couple of more travel ones. This is a poem called simply Poem. I found a poem in the street on Tuesday. It was red and yellow and slightly sticky when I picked it up. It said, "Lick me. Delicious." Like all poems, it lied, but helped to explain the truth. This is I wrote in 2009. My wife had had a stroke in Papua New Guinea. while she was working there, and was airlifted to Townsville Hospital in Queensland. So this is at Townsville Hospital, North Queensland. At the hospital, we mingled together, looking for hope. Trying to be kind for life is not. Accepting every sentimental phrase, knowing behind each tired word there lies meaning and a history. Words falling almost heedlessly from someone's mouth retains a memory of purpose. There are so many times we're all reduced to this, bludgeoned by life, yet we still respond. We remain human and cannot turn away. Here we are, pushing each other in wheelchairs, all the amputees, severed from loved ones, homes, memories, or limbs, painting on a brave face, telling each other, you have to laugh. Outside the glass, a bush turkey waits for fruitcake. Outside the glass, the street lights are decorated with cockatoos. Giant rain trees and paper guns fill with the chatter and disputes of rainbow parakeets. Ibises march and probe the soil. Outside the glass at 6:30, an inflamed orange moon rises between the foxtail and lipstick palms. And another travel one on Negros Oriental, Philippines, and I wrote this, I think in 2010. Far from home, I pause on a low seawall beneath a vast blue dome decorated with breeze-stretched and twisted cloud trails, mare's tails. Sitting on the horizon, almost black against a bright hazy blue, an island appears to be bracketed between a long white scroll of cloud and dark wind agitated sea. Behind me, houses hide beneath the green leaf shade of palms and trees that climb to the volcano's rim, and from within the green, birds sing. And a cock crows triumphantly, a cock crows announcing there is light between night and night. With courage, a cock crows, I am here, I am here, I am here. Even in the gathering darkness, overcoming fear, the cock crows, I am here, I am here. Thank you.
The onomatopoeic cockerel. Lovely, thank you, Joel. I enjoyed those. Even though I remember two of them, but they were still fresh to me. So lovely poems. Thank you very much. Right, Ruth.
Right. I think I might have. Let me see. Okay, I'll just open the book and read one from the page that it ended up on. Right, a poem called Allow Me. Allow me to sync my calendar with yours and send you inappropriate emails in cuneiform. Allow me to open the door in a caftan when I've cooked you liver and lights with larks on the side. Allow me to further embellish your after-dinner talk with extravagant lies. Allow me to introduce my friend, She laughs like a kookaburra, but it doesn't last long. Allow me to push crustaceans between your toes. Allow me to figure you with a dowsing stick. Allow me to read Lysistrata in bed, then practice the hardest knot, with nothing in mind but the hardest knot. Allow me to wipe the floor with a foreign power and smuggle my name onto the official secrets list. Allow me to order a shed for all my mistakes. Allow me to say, you're the best thing since I don't know what.
You got another one, Ruth? Or you going to want to dig again into that lovely book of yours?
Right, let's have a look. Oh yeah, written shortly after my son was born, long time ago now. Newborn. The light appalls him. Every wince of his face shows his horror to leave that dark mooring. At his navel a raw stalk weeps, and skin smooth as vulcanite dries to puff pastry. From the folds of his shawl, nose, brow, curled fist, the weight of him. He's a mole in our arms. His cheeks pucker. He dreams of milk on his suckling tongue. In the wastes of his cot, white blankets coddle the small rising with its scrimp of hair. We wait for the seams of his eyes to open, the mouth to square. It will call us from the ends of the earth.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ruth. That was worth waiting for. Beautiful experience. Peter.
Right, I'm going to read two poems about lost languages. The first one is by John Burnside, The Last Man to Speak Ubik. And there's a note saying linguist Ole Stig Anderson was keen to seek out the remaining traces of a West Caucasian language called Ubik. Having heard there was one remaining speaker, he set out to find the man and arrived in his village on October the 8th, 1992. Unfortunately, the man had died a few hours earlier. This is the poem. At times in those last few months, he would think of a word, and he had to remember the tree or the species of frog that sound denoted, the tree itself, or the frog, or the state of mind, but not the equivalent word in another language. The speech that had taken his sons in the mountain light, the graves he swept and raked, the wedding songs. While years of silence gathered in the heat, he stood in the yard and whispered the name of a bird in his mother tongue. While memories of snow and market days, his father's hands, the smell of tamarind, receded in the names no longer used. The blue of childhood folded like a sheet and tucked away. Nothing he said was remembered. Nothing he did was fact or legend in the village square. Yet later they would memorize the word he spoke that morning just before he died. A name for death, perhaps, or meadow grass, or swimming to the surface of his mind, another word they had when he was young, a word they rarely spoke, though it was there, for all they knew that nobody remembered. And Michael Donaghy, Quorum. In today's Guardian, the word quorum is spelled the same as okurum, the only surviving word of Khazar, according to the great Soviet encyclopedia, a quorum meaning I have read. The original pronunciation is lost forever, but I weigh 3 syllables in my palm against paprika and samovar, cedarwood, and for some reason mistletoe. I have read an entire literature and enacted all that it describes. On a winter morning in an ochre room that we can never enter, the resonance of those imaginary consonants the elders whisper over ancient documents flickers the blood-bright shadow from a glass of tea.
Thank you, Peter. Wow, thank you. always find interesting poems to read, don't you? Beautiful ones. Makes us all feel inadequate though to try and read something after them. I'm not sure if this works, but this is I've put some of my haiku together about Croydon just to make Joel feel a bit nostalgic, or not, as the case may be. But it does start off with a sort of prelude that's not a haiku. So this is the prelude to Croydon walking haikus. The 68 buses, as scarlet as pillar boxes, make their early morning way to Chalk Farm. And apart from alley cats and urban foxes, these fully loaded do very little harm. Trundling through Thornton Heath, in Camberwell Green are seen, sticking to bus lanes, stopping at stops, request or not. So that's prelude. And then we come on to the haiku. Black dustbins on streets, yellow tickets on windscreens. It's collection day. The black and white cat smiles from a dry window ledge. Soft rain is falling. An old man with a husky dog says good morning. Mine is far apart. Cigarette smoke and trails of workers heading for the railway station. Upturned buckets sit like Daleks by the fence of the empty car wash. Apple cores and tin cans spread across the pavement the night of the fox. A chill wind blows at the underpass on broken glass and graffiti. Those are my Croydon haikus. And your poem licking poem, I've got one on thoughts on toad licking, Joel. This is, again, it's a slightly American because I think this is an American desert toad that they use to lick. And I think the Colorado Nature Conservancy people has put out an appeal saying to people, do not lick the toads. Anyway, thoughts on toad licking. Some say you can lick certain toads for an out-of-body feeling, but how does a toad feel? Sorry. Some say you can lick certain toads for an out-of-body feeling, but how does a toad feel when loads of tongues set the toad's feelings reeling? Does the toad think it's not my fault if these silly creatures want to get high, who think there's something in each wart that they need just to get by? What toad wants a soft slurpy tongue full of germs and menthol toothpaste? It won't produce a prince, old or young, and I'm sure it's not quite to my taste. So there we go, boom, boom, poetry finished.
Thank you, George.
Sounds like a toad curling experience.
Martin, I always rely on you for the